murder trial is underway in Fort Worth for a teenage rapper who recorded a song while he was on the run. Now, teenage rapper Tay-K is facing time in prison.
The guilty verdict against Tamor Tay-K McIntyre was delivered this morning, but as Jason Allen reports live in Fort Worth, the trial is not yet over.
23-year-old Tamon Trayvon McIntyre, professionally known as Tay-K, is a controversial rap figure and convicted murderer. Together with his gang of delinquents, he created a rap group called Daytona Boys in 2014, most of whom are now either behind bars or house arrest or 6 feet underground. Murder charges, plea deals, snitches, and burnt bridges. This is the true story of what happened to Tay-K's friend. Tay-K and the Daytona Boys. Back in 2014, Tay-K and his homies, Jalen Bell, also known as Pimpy Z, and Eric Johnson, aka Santana Sage, started a rap group called the Daytona Boys. Growing up together in California, these boys were all savages and were not intimidated by the street life, but they didn't know their way around the music game just yet. It took a while before they built a buzz and hype with their music. The group released their first track, Drift, on SoundCloud on Christmas Day in 2014 and followed up with a series of songs. But besides performing at random parties and dropping singles on SoundCloud, they weren't really making any waves in the rap scene. In the summer of 2015, Tay-K dropped a solo track called Biff Zanyu. He followed that up with Sly Cooper and started gaining some attention in the local community. With Tay-K starting to pop off, things were looking bright for the Daytona Boys. They were able to play some more official shows and get improved gigs. As mentioned before, Tay-K and his crew were no strangers to gang life and were commonly involved in acts of theft, robbery, and drug trafficking. It was not long before the law caught up with each of them. Just when they were starting to see a bit of success, the New Year's Eve incident happened. New Year's Eve house party.
Denton police say they have identified the passengers riding with a drive-by murder suspect accused of killing a 20-year-old UNT student. We're now getting the first look at the SUV involved in the murder and a closer look at the victim, Sarah Munchlechner's vehicle.
This night was the beginning of the end for the Daytona Boys. Tay-K, Santana Sage, and Pimpy Z all performed at a New Year's Eve house party in Denton, Texas. After the performance, they decided to bounce around 2 a.m. As they were leaving, Santana Sage pulled up next to a sedan driven by 20-year-old Sarah Munchlechner, a student at the University of North Texas taking a course in radio, film, and television. Sarah was the designated driver for her friends on New Year's Eve, and after leaving the house party at 2 a.m., she stopped at a red light at the intersection of North Elm Street and University Drive. Santana Sage and his homies, Tay-K and Pimpy Z, pulled up next to them in a gray SUV and signaled for them to roll their window down. The Daytona Boys started catcalling and screaming at Sarah's car. Santana Sage and the others asked where they were going and if they wanted to have sex. This provoked a reaction from Sarah's car, and her male friend yelled back saying he was going to beat up Santana. Despite the cold 2 a.m. Texas air, this exchange was getting heated real quick. Johnson decided to fire 2 gunshots, claiming he only intended to scare off Sarah. Instead, the bullet hit her in the skull and she was killed. The sedan she was driving hit another car before crashing into an electric pole. Witnesses told the police that the Daytona Boys sped away from the scene. Officers with the Denton Police Department found Sarah lying on the ground near a 4-door sedan that had crashed into an electric pole. She was placed on life support but was later taken off and died on New Year's Day. The police traced the shooting back to Santana through a Twitter post that showed him next to the SUV he was driving that night. During the trial, Santana stated that the passenger where Sarah Munchlechner had called him and his fellow passengers racial and homophobic slurs, and that he only intended to scare the passengers in the other car off after receiving threats of bodily harm. But according to court documents, police say Santana Sage and the Daytona Boys in his SUV shouted remarks towards passengers in Sarah's car that they were very derogatory and of a sexual nature. Santana Sage's trial lasted a week, and the jury of 7 men and 6 women only needed a day to find him guilty of murder. They spent the next day determining Johnson's punishment. Denton County District Attorney's Office released a statement and sentenced him to 44 years in prison.
The former Marine accused of killing a UNT student will spend the next 44 years in prison. Eric Johnson learned his sentence just a few hours ago. Johnson was convicted of shooting and killing Sarah Munchlechner last year while she drove a group of sorority sisters home from a party.
Tay-K and Pimpy Z were minors when this hit went down, 15 and 16 years old respectively. Witnessing their best friend and band member shoot an innocent woman dead in the head in a drive-by shooting with absolutely no personal consequences to them, it's of little wonder that they would go on from this to get into a lot more trouble. It's this situation that sets the stage for a series of events that would leave Tay-K and 6 other people with the best part of their years spent behind bars. 7 Deadly Sinners, 7 months after Santana Sage got busted, Tay-K and Pimpy Z were involved in a deadly robbery that led to the downfall of the Daytona Boys amongst their other associates. The robbery took place at the house of one Zachary Belloway in the 1500 block in Aspen Court of Mansfield, Texas. This is how a quick recap of the robbery went down. Zachary Belloway was dating a teenage girl at the time named MS. Her real name was left out because she was tried as a minor and not as an adult. Belloway shared a house with Ethan Walker, father of a 3-year-old daughter, and another roommate. Belloway's girlfriend, MS, believed that Belloway and Ethan Walker had been selling small amounts of marijuana, and she decided to rob him along with her friends. She told her close friends Ariana Barrett and Megan Holt that a gun would be needed for the robbery. Holt recruited Tay-K, who was also a teenager at the time, to commit the robbery, and he, in turn, recruited 3 other young men, Letharian Merritt, Sean Robinson, and Pimpy Z. On the fateful night of the robbery, MS, Megan Holt, and Ariana Barrett went to Belloway's house at 1500 Aspen Court under the pretense of spending time together and going to smoke some weed. The woman unlocked the exterior doors and the 4 men let themselves in. Finding it hard to locate the drugs and money, one of the men pointed a gun at Belloway. MS, Holt, and Barrett left the room unimpeded. As tensions rose and the money and drugs remained unfound, a confrontation took place between Letharian Merritt, Sean Robinson, Zachary Belloway, and Ethan Walker. Apparently, Sean Robinson, who was holding up Zach Belloway at gunpoint, put 2 hands on the gun and opened fire in the air after being told there was no money.
Well, everybody left the room, and then one guy was at the front of my room in the doorway, and I was right in front of the bed, like pretty much point blank range. And he sat there and hesitated for about 2 minutes with one hand, and when he grabbed it with 2 hands, that's when I knew he was gonna pull the trigger.
Belloway, who was 17 at the time, said he never heard the shot that was fired that killed his roommate that night, 21-year-old Ethan Walker. After the 7 assailants left the house, Belloway left his room to find Walker laying in the hallway. And I seen Ethan gasping for air, and I said, "You going to be okay?" He testified. Then I went to grab a gun and go out the front door. Shortly after the gunshots, the rest of the crew ran away from the house, leaving together in a white vehicle. Belloway and Walker were both shot during the robbery. Belloway was shot in his shoulder and was able to run to his neighbors to ask for help. Walker, however, was shot in his abdomen and later died from his injuries. Justice is served. All 7 members who took part in the attempted robbery and cold murder of Ethan Walker had a date with Lady Justice, and this was what befell each of them. The mastermind of the entire operation, 17-year-old MS, whose name and image are still largely unknown except for the fact that she has blonde hair. While Belloway was still in the hospital, he informed police that MS left the house just after the shooting. Belloway gave police MS's address, and they spoke to MS's brother, who said that MS came home in a white vehicle between 11 and 11:30 p.m. He also informed them that MS had been with Holt and Barrett, and when she came home, she looked clearly nervous, and she told him that she had hit a lick and it went bad. The term hit a lick means to illegally obtain money in a short time. Now, because MS was a minor at the time, her mother had to give her permission to be interviewed by the police, which she did. MS was taken to the police headquarters for questioning, and after the police had told MS that Ethan Walker had died, she agreed to help identify the other suspects. MS helped in identifying 3 of the 4 male suspects by their street name. Even after concocting the entire plan herself, she really was out here just snitching on everybody unprovoked. So much for honor among thieves. The following day, MS was arrested for capital murder. She then gave police an additional statement, and she provided a physical description of Merritt, whom she knew was Larry. Police also interviewed Megan Holt in connection with the murder. Holt knew Larry, and she identified him as the man in the photograph provided by MS. In the end, MS was found guilty by a jury of 3 delinquent conduct charges, capital murder, and 2 aggravated robbery charges, and sentenced in February to 20 years confinement. Letharian Merritt was the trigger man in Walker's shooting and was arrested on capital murder charges. He initially gave 2 statements to police, admitting that he had shot Ethan Walker. But strangely enough, 2 years later, Letharian Merritt appeared in court and testified that he didn't remember pulling the trigger. Come on, man. You had 2 whole years to come up with the defense, and this was all you had? He was inevitably convicted of capital murder by a jury. Because prosecutors had waived the death penalty, the 24-year-old California native was automatically sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole, and will therefore serve out the rest of his days in prison. Merritt appealed the ruling. However, his appeal was shot down. Sean Robinson was also originally charged with capital murder in the death of Ethan Walker. He was the one who shot Zachary Belloway, who survived the incident with a bullet to the shoulder. He pleaded guilty to murder in exchange for a 40-year prison sentence, which is a very good outcome outcome for him, considering the fact that it allowed him to avoid a more serious capital murder charge like the death penalty or life in jail without the possibility of parole. With credit for time served, he'll have to serve 18 years before becoming eligible for parole. Robinson's defense attorney, Wes Ball, said that his client is remorseful and feels devastated about the murder and how severely it affected Walker's family. Mr. Robinson wasn't the shooter, of course, but a very bright young man with probably a great future if he applied himself in the right way, Ball said. He lost his way, got with some people, and got involved in this offense, and therefore his life gets destroyed. It's just a terrible, sad thing all the way around. Megan Holt was another person involved in the robbery homicide of Ethan Walker. She was friends with MS and Tay-K and was crucial to the link between MS and Tay-K. She is the reason Tay-K and his crew got involved. However, when push came to shove, she was the first to snitch. Megan Holt got a guilty plea on an aggravated robbery charge, avoiding the more serious capital murder charge and any possibility of getting the death penalty after she agreed to testify against all of her co-defendants in court. As part of a plea bargain agreement, Holt was promised a 20-year sentence by the prosecution in exchange for her testimony in the trials of the other defendants. Ariana Barat was born on the 27th of December 1995. She was not a close acquaintance with Tay-K and was the only one involved in the robbery through her friend MS, the teenage friend of Beloe. She was a cocktail waitress at the time and was not involved in major crimes. Just like her friend MS and Megan, she agreed to be a major snitch. In August 2018, Ariana Barat pleaded guilty to aggravated robbery and also agreed to testify against Tay-K as well as two other co-defendants, Sean Robinson and Pimpy Z. As part of the deal, Barat will avoid capital murder charges by pleading guilty to aggravated robbery in exchange for a 25-year prison sentence. She was incarcerated at the Tarrant County Lon Evans Correction Center, located in Fort Worth, Texas. Her earliest release date is expected to be the 24th of January 2029. Since she got to prison, Ariana has been taking up reading, working, and even going to school in jail with hopes of having a better life when she finally leaves jail. Remember Pimpy Z, one of the founding members of the Daytona Boys? In November 2018, he also got what was coming to him. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of aggravated robbery in relation to the 2016 robbery/murder that resulted in the injury of Zachary Beloe and the death of then 21-year-old Ethan Walker. Pimpy Z was accused of being an accomplice to the then 16-year-old Tay-K. Pimpy Z was originally offered a 20-year sentence to snitch on Tay-K, but he refused to cooperate with the police and ended up taking a plea deal in exchange for a 30-year sentence instead. He accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. An extra 10 years behind bars for your day one homie isn't as bad as it seems, I guess. Pimpy Z was emotionless when the sentence was read. However, his mother rushed out of the courtroom crying very loudly. Ethan Walker's mother, Roberta Walker, addressed the guilty young man, telling him she wished he would show some remorse for his part in the murder.
I wish what I saw in your face was some feeling that you're sorry for what you did. I wish what I saw was that you understand your role in it and that you had the power to stop it at any time. You could have cut it off at the path.
Even though the criminal justice system in the USA gets a lot of flack, it's safe to say that they got this one right. The clenched fist of justice descended upon all of Tay-K's friends, and the family of all the victims got their much needed closure. After learning the fate of the Daytona Boys and their associates, it is important not to forget the families truly affected by the senseless acts of violence perpetrated by Tay-K and his friends. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other awesome videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.